Welcome to the Redefined Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we are actually going to connect our previous two episodes. Episode 268 we talked about visibility and why it's important, and also why we are so afraid of being visible. And episode 269 talked about purpose and why, right? The things that motivate you externally and internally. I think this is two important topics and themes to connect, because then hopefully by the end of today's episode, you'll have a better perspective in terms of the work that you have to do internally to be able to put yourself out there and create a presence online. And as I've stated many times before on this show, creating a presence is really, it's so important in today's age, whether you have a business or not. So, again, hopefully by the end of this, you'll be convinced that that it's not that big of a deal and that you can do it. And that's really what we want to get to, right? We want to get to helping you build the confidence and the confidence to take those first steps, second steps, and third steps and beyond into this online world, into this social media world, into this content creation world. Now, revisiting episode 268 on visibility, we talked about why it is so difficult, right? And all of that kind of ingrained programming, ancient prehistoric programming, caveman programming that was really rooted in basic survival is still with us today. Right? Basic survival is if you stand out, if you leave the tribe, if you leave the village, you are more at risk by yourself because there are predators out there that are likely to eat you, right? Saber-toothed tigers and the like. In numbers, when you're with the tribe, when you're in the village, when you stay around the fire, it's much safer because there's safety in numbers, right? Safety in numbers. And so that kind of evolved over time as we as a species got more proficient in basic survival. Those instincts of staying as a group became, ingrained in our DNA, but it evolved into societal and cultural norms, right? And again, it's the safety in numbers. If you do something that's different, or if you're different than everybody else, then you actually are risking the tribe. And so these judgments and the persecution come from wanting to protect the tribe, and ultimately it ends up programming that you never want to be any different, right? You just become part of the herd. Again, it's a survival mechanism that's evolved into cultural and social norms, and part of that judgment becomes easy because it's coming from the majority, right? It's easy to judge when everybody else is judging. It's easy to judge from the protection of numbers. It's easy to persecute the thing that's different from the protection of numbers. And so, that gets more and more ingrained in our DNA over the millennia. And then, you bring in the internet, and it becomes even easier to persecute and to judge, right? Because you do it from the relative safety and anonymity of your mobile device, or whatever that happens to be, right? There's no immediate repercussions for being nasty in the comments section, right? You can do it on a whim and not have any repercussions. So all of this is in play, makes it incredibly terrifying to stand out, right? Incredibly terrifying. Standing out and making yourself visible. You expose yourself to, obviously it's not basic survival anymore, but you expose yourself to these judgments and to that persecution because you're doing something that the rest of the tribe isn't doing, right? That the majority of the tribe isn't doing. And so facing that persecution and that judgment is frightening, right? It's frightening because, again, it's deeply ingrained in our DNA not to stand out and not to be visible, to blend in, to be part of the crowd. The fear is exactly that. The fear is of judgment. The fear is of persecution, to be made fun of, or to be called stupid, or whatever. All these things that happen in our head. It's no longer a survival thing. The fears are definitely rooted in social and societal structures, and of course, amplified and multiplied by the internet, right? That exposure that we get when we post content, any kind of content, really, when we post it, it's yeah. I mean, like, you have the potential to reach billions of people. I mean, you see these content creators all the time that are, have just hit a million followers. I'm following one individual. I can't remember which one, but I remember a post from this past week where they just hit 10 million followers, right? Like, that's amazing, right? To have 10 million followers, and then potentially beyond that, the amount of content that they're putting out to be seen and clicked and viewed billions of times. That's the level of exposure that we potentially open ourselves up to. And then that is obviously then, in your mind, in that prehistoric brain of ours, we're thinking, well, that level of exposure equals that level of risk and danger, right? And that's why it gets so scary, right? That's why public speaking, I mentioned that in episode 268. That's why public speaking is so frightening, because we it's a protective mechanism that we have in our DNA. Obviously, none of that actually exists yet until you actually post content, until you purposely create content that's not like what everybody else is doing, which majority people are, posting status updates, which again is fine. If you're using social media for that, but for creating well, for the purposes of wanting to build an audience and build a real presence, and attract people to whatever message that you're trying to put out there, you gotta do more than just put status updates up there, and what lunch you happen to be eating, or mimosas by the beach and stuff like that. Again, that's all well and good, but that's not going to really serve the purposes of what we're talking about. The only thing, really, the main thing that you have to do if you want to stand out is just be willing to be yourself online and show people who you really are. Be authentically you. And I know that puts you in a place of tremendous vulnerability. But the vulnerability, I've seen it time and time again, it wins, right? It's what actually people are attracted to, because it reminds them and it gives them permission that they can be themselves as well, right? So the more true you are to yourself in your content, the more authentic you are, the more vulnerable you are, that's what people will be drawn to. And it's not the kind of thing where, you're trying to get everybody, but there ultimately will be people in the world that will resonate with your message, or it's vice versa. Your message and your content will ultimately resonate with people. Someone is looking for the content that you're going to create, is looking for you to be authentic and to be vulnerable and to be true to yourself. Again, it's incredibly frightening. So here's where the why comes in, right? The why it's got to be strong enough for you. Your purpose of being online and of putting yourself out there and risking all that level of exposure, it's got to drive you enough to do that. And I think that's really hard well, again, it's deeply ingrained in our DNA. So it makes it difficult to break social norms, or to be different from what everybody else is, because there's such a high level of exposure. There's a high level there's a potential high level of judgment and persecution. So our purpose and our why has to be really, really strong. Now, as an aside, I want you to know that your purpose and your why doesn't have to move anybody else. It doesn't have to mean anything to anybody else except you, right? If you wanna post content and start being out there on social, whatever reason you and purpose you have for that, it's only for you, right? It doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, or it's not for your family, it's not for your kids, it's not for your aunt, and it's not for your dogs. It's got to be for you. Your why, your purpose for stepping into this digital space, for stepping into this space of exposing yourself on social media and with content creation. That purpose has to be your drive and your drive alone, right? It doesn't, none of what anybody else thinks about it has to matter, and shouldn't, because that's only going to get in the way of you doing the thing, right? Your purpose and your why is only for yourself. So don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Don't worry about, what other people's definitions of what it means to be in the online space. If your purpose and your why is you want to be an influencer, that's awesome. As long as it's strong enough to get you to do that, purpose and that why is strong enough to get you to do the difficult thing, to get you to face those challenges, those internal and external, but mostly internal challenges of the fear of exposing yourself, the fear of being visible, the fear of judgment, the fear of persecution. Because remember, it is a very, very deeply ingrained in our DNA, deeply ingrained fear, right? It's programmed. It's a primordial programming that's been with us since the dawn of man. It's survival instinct, and so it's hard. It's really hard to counteract that. And the only way you're going to be able to counteract that is having a really strongly connected why. You have to have a strong purpose to step out of the herd. You have to have a strong why to step out of the herd and expose yourself and put yourself at risk of that visibility, because we're working against ancient prehistoric programming, right? Deeply ingrained in our DNA. So make sure, and again, it doesn't matter what it is, like, it doesn't matter what I think about your why. It doesn't matter what your mom thinks about your why. None of that matters. What matters is it's enough to move you. It's enough to motivate you, right? So whether, again, like, from an external standpoint, if you want you want the notoriety, or you want the to grow your following so that you can grow your business, and therefore grow your income, and you have a better life for yourself. That's external. That's what all of that means to you. Then you have to internalize it and make that strong. If it's something like, you just want to be a content creator, or you want to entertain people, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Again, as long as that purpose and that why is strong enough for you to counteract the prehistoric instinct to survive and stay safe. That's how these two things connect. The visibility is frightening, and it's that fear is amplified and magnified by the internet. Ancient, deeply ingrained programming, right? It's terrifying. So we have to have a strong reason to put ourselves online, right? We have to have a strong why. So figure that out. Again, creating visibility for yourself, I think, is super, super important, and it puts you in a good position. If you create an online presence, it puts you in a good position to be able to navigate whatever economic storms come your way, whether it's downsizing, whether it's technology taking your jobs, whether recession, anything, right? Anything. To the digital space and having a following is really, really advantageous. And of course, if you're talking about business owners and entrepreneurism, then of course, like you'd be stupid not to create an online presence, right? You'd be stupid not to be visible, because this is where business is. This is where the marketplace is. So tons of advantage of being visible, and putting yourself out there and creating a presence online, but also tons and tons of barriers, internal mental barriers that we have to fight. We have to fight ancient, prehistoric programming and survival instincts to take those first steps. Now, understand that everything that we're afraid of, when it comes to creating visibility online and putting ourselves out there, it's all up here, right? The programming is out here, right? And even if people do persecute and judge you, and you have haters, which ultimately you will, none of that really has to affect it, because it's not a saber-toothed tiger, right? You're not going to be eaten, right? You're not going to be eaten. So the work is up here, right? That all that challenge and well, because the fear is up here, that thought of that you're going to be persecuted, and that you're going to be judged, and that you're going to be hated, or you're going to look stupid. That's all up here, and so you have to work against that, and do that internal work to build your confidence. And you'll see once you start getting into the groove that okay, so I didn't die, I didn't get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, and in fact, you'll start to enjoy the process. So that's the message for today. Create visibility for yourself, with the understanding that you have prehistoric programming, survival instincts that's going to tell you not to do it. But as long as you have a powerful and strong internal drive, external drive, you'll be able to get through it and realize that, it wasn't so bad after all. So that's it for today. In our next episode, we're going to talk about the end of the world. Dun, dun, dun. So that's coming out on Thursday. But until then, well, if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and hit the subscribe or the plus button on this podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, and so that you don't miss an update and that you don't miss a new episode. And they come out every Tuesday, every Thursday, unless it's a holiday like it was last week for Thanksgiving here in the US. But otherwise, expect to see me every Tuesday and Thursday. So until the next episode, be well, be safe, and go towards goodness.